themselves into the classroom also gives Montclair students the opportunity to develop important life skills, and riding the bus gives them independence while still being supervised by a trusted adult. Mike's role is not always as visible since the job is outside the school building, but Mike is equally a part of the school day for the kids who ride the bus. We are grateful to have the bus service from Grant Park to Montclair, and especially fortunate to have Mike as our regular driver. For these reasons, our community would like to see Mike recognized as the CUSD classified employee. Well, it's people like you that make our district so special, so thank you so much for your service. And I have a couple of things for you. Oh, did anyone else want to speak about Mike? All right, sorry.
She is the best boss I ever worked for, so she's awesome. This is Sherry Christian, by the way. Come on, Sherry. Help me out.
So Mike is not only a wonderful bus driver, he's actually our lead driver, and he takes care of all of our field trips. So he bends over backwards to accommodate all the schools, if at all possible, to make sure the kids get on their field trips on time. So he just does a great job. We used to, we weren't the most efficient in that area, but Mike has put up a system where he has everything come through emails so that we can back up who's doing what and when, and so there's very little hiccups in our program. But I just know that he loves the Montclair kids, and we were going to try to put those on minis because it was reduced, and he really fought to keep that because he loves the children and he wants to keep doing that job. So we're really, really grateful to have him. He does a great job, and he always is available whenever we need him, so he is a gift to our department.
I just want to say that not only does he serve Montclair, but he comes through the CMS parking lot as well. And for those of you who have driven through a middle school parking lot, you don't usually have a smile on your face. But Mike does, and he greets the kids, and even when there's things that they could do better, he addresses them with a smile, and the kids respect him, and we're able to work together to make sure that the kids are safe in our parking lot as well and have a safe ride home. So we appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm Allison Lavara, principal at Montclair, and I have two amazing students here with me, Isa and Olivia Martin. And Isa, I'm sorry, would like to share something as well.
Isa.
Some things that I like about Mike is that he is always kind to all the riders on the bus, and he takes time while we're doing the route to memorize the kids' names instead of just calling
ago, I was working a summer program. I had some special ed kids, and that one child had a little accident the day before, and he'd come back in, and he was going to about have another accident again, and I was looking for help. Can you help me? Got it taken care of. So she was great, and one of my favorites for sure. Thanks, everybody. Beautiful. You're welcome. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, you.
Okay, we're moving along now to recognition of our newly tenured teachers. This is a really special night. Not only do we get to honor a classified employee of the month, but we get to recognize the teachers who have worked so hard over the last 2 years to earn tenure. So welcome to all of you, and congratulations to all of you. And I'll let you know kind of how this is going to go. Stacy's going to read the names. When your name is read, you'll come up and stand on the stage. The first people have to stand there a long time. And you'll pass by one of the board members who will give you a certificate for your earning tenure. You'll stay on the stage the whole time, and when the last person is up there, the board will join you and we'll get some pictures. So, Stacey, thank you.
Thank you, and it truly is a pleasure, and this is such a rewarding time. So a teacher to become a permanent employee means that they've successfully completed 2 consecutive years and then are re-elected, so this is the start of their 3rd year. Tonight we have 59 teachers, which is wonderful, and I just want to give a special thanks to those teachers who chose to continue with us and truly make CUSD the place to be. And it is because of the work of the teachers that CUSD is flourishing and continues and grows and offers so much for our students. So with that, I will read names. I know some are not in attendance, but I would still like to read their name. And we'll get started with Blue Hills being our first school. So can I have Lily Moore come on up and receive your certificate? We have 3 from Korea, Alexandra Lipka. Casey Ottawa. And Sama Saad. From Garden Gate, Alaya Amin. From Lincoln Elementary, Chelsea Joseph. And Deirdre Pierce. Our 2 staff members from McCullough aren't in attendance tonight, but I wanted to recognize them, Jessica Eastland and Sonia Gada. And from Meyer Holtz, Jennifer.
Hold on 1 second.
Hold on.
We're behind on...
See, this is exciting times. I get ahead of myself.
congratulations. All right.
All right, from Meyerholtz, Jennifer Stewart. From Montclair, Rebecca Marlin. From Muir, we have 2 staff members, but they're not in. From Sedgwick Elementary, we have Kylie Mulcair. Delina Stefan. And 2 staff members I don't believe are in attendance, Kristen Dekovich and Slavana Nikotina. From Stevens Creek, we have Pam Stephenson Porges. And from Stockmeyer, we have Manaz Orampuana. Rita Palos. I don't believe Aparna Surachana. To West Valley Elementary, we have 4 teachers who are now permanent employees. Bridget Bursick. Nicole Saban. Middle School, we have Janet Boyke. And I don't believe Debbie Ong and David Tang from Miller. From our Educational Services Department, we have Carrie Eichenberg. Rebecca Mesh. Not able to join us, Navita Dewey and Joshua Shellhorse. From our Student Services Department, we have Dorothy Basie.
All right, next on the agenda is employee organizations. Do we have any? Employee organizations? Do we have any communication from employee organizations? Do we? Okay.
Not able to make it today. So Marianne Cunningham, I'm the Vice President of CEA. Wasn't expecting to get up here, so I'm just saying, I hope you have a great year. And so that's really my comment is, let's have a fantastic year. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have public comment, and the public comment, do we have a public comment? It's on the agenda item. Okay. All right, so moving on to the public hearing on sufficiency of materials. I'm opening the hearing on sufficiency of materials. And we have one comment. So the guidelines on public comments are 3 minutes and are contained. When you hear the obnoxious noise, your time's up.
I won't be that one. Kim James, teacher at Hyde Middle School. I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention that we are not in compliance yet, and that you have up until the 8th week of school to sign this document, and I'm urging you to wait to sign this document. We still do not have all our math textbooks since the implementation of Math 6 to Math 6 Plus. And they are on order. I've been in contact with the district office, but we do not physically have them in our hand. We do not physically have them in the students' homes. So I'm urging you guys to not sign this until those are actually in the students' homes.
Thank you, Kim.
Do we want to respond to that video?
We do have a few instructional materials that we've been tracking, and we anticipate having everything in place before we ask you to sign on the 26th of September. So this is the hearing, and then we have the official signing at the next board meeting. So I believe everything is in transit, and some of it's in our warehouse already, so we should be on track to have everything in place prior to signing the resolution on the 26th.
So this will come back on our agenda
Yes.
on the 26th, so we don't take any action
No,
tonight.
this is just the hearing, the next meeting is when we need to ensure that we have everything in place. Great.
All right, thank you, Allison, and thank you, Kim. Okay, next we have a very long consent calendar. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm closing the public hearing. A little up for my friends here. So we're moving to consent calendar 10. Is there a motion?
So we need to separate out.
Okay, would you like to make that motion?
I can't make that motion.
Would someone make that motion?
I move to approve item 10.1.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 3-0-1, something like that. So now we have 10.2 to 10.25. Is there a motion?
So I move 10.2 to 10.25.
I'll second the motion.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion carries 4-0 with 1 absent. Moving on to 11.1, discussion of district priorities for the 1920 and potentially the 2021 school years. Craig?
Great, so you may be tag teaming this one. Let me look at my notes. I want to just explain to you a little bit about the document. You'll notice we made a revised one, and you should have it. You had a 2-pager, it's now a 3-pager. And just to talk about these priorities, because we did them a little differently this year. So we started off having 5 on here, which was in an original draft that I believe you would have seen.
Do you want to put that?
Which should have it here.
Oh, okay. I did.
So it's posted there as a revised, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So it should say revised. And so basically, what we did is, as you saw, we wrote a preamble using 2 of the priorities, and we just realized that so much of what we had there was about this notion of continued momentum. Let's not add a bunch of new things to do, because everybody's working hard on a bunch of things we've been doing for the last several years, and we try to capture that in the preamble. And then we noted that, and some of you had said to me, that it does stand out that our priorities as a district, even though it's a very internal set of goals, it doesn't really reflect on student outcome. And so we added that end of that paragraph that's in italics on that front page just before the priorities. And then we added a 3rd page, which now has pulls out for you what are those student outcome measures that we already named in the LCAP, through SIPSAs, through other means, just to make sure that you're clear that we will be addressing student outcomes as well. And we're going to talk to you tonight about a dashboard, which is one of the things we want to do that would include those and other items. So that's just sort of the framing. Then we do have the 3 district priorities under that, which you've seen already. And I won't review them because we have them there. And then what we do want to do today really is talk about a list of 7, I would say, more concepts than measures. And what we know is that there's a set of them that are really more just achievements, right? They are either you do them or you don't. You know, get a plan done by a certain date, or it's sort of an outcome as opposed to a measure, right? And then there are other ones that really would be part of a dashboard of some kind, or in other ways. Our goal today is to have you talk your ideas about what you hope to accomplish around these areas, which ones are progress goals we want to measure. Hear your ideas on that, and we intend to come back to the next meeting, hopefully, with more specifics on actual measures on those. And with that, I think, Allison, you were going to do a little review of all of them. Take us through this process.
So we're going to gather your feedback as Craig suggested, but first I just wanted to call your attention to the big sample dashboard that you have at your seat. This is not our data. We posted this to board docs too. I just want to be really clear that this is just a sample that came in the mail. It has our name on it, but it's not our data. It is just a visual representation of the way a dashboard could look. So we're just kind of looking high level at the kind of visual representation, not worrying about the data itself that's on there because it's not our data. But we thought it would be helpful to bring because as we are moving into this exciting phase of implementing the strategic plan and talking about how we're going to mark our progress along the way, we thought that this could be a good outcome for us to aim for this year. It's to develop our own visual. Maybe there would be similar features to this, or maybe it would go in a different direction. But to have a visual dashboard that would help us mark our progress towards the priorities and towards the larger strategic plan. So as we go through the different sections tonight, I wanted to ask for your feedback on, as we think about the measures for this year, what are some concrete pieces that either could maybe show up in our version of a dashboard, a visual representation, or maybe there are things on there that are more outcome-based. It may be something that we're going to finish within this 2-year time frame, but wouldn't necessarily show up on a dashboard. So we're hoping to go through each item, and knowing that this is a concept right now and not in a measurable term, and just get your thoughts on what are some concrete definitions of success that come up for you under each item, either on the dashboard or separate from that. What are your thoughts about this idea of a dashboard as an outcome for us to produce? And then if you have any thoughts on the time frame for how we might be marking our progress or completing. We know that we will be bringing updates to you mid-year, end of year as we go through the cycle of our reporting to you. But if there are specific timeframes that you have in mind or hopes that you'd like to share around any of these measures, then we'd like to give you an opportunity to discuss that so that we can take your feedback and then bring back to you some more concrete ideas. So,
Can I ask a clarification question? So when you said you'll take us through the sections, you mean the 5 sections that are in the sample dashboard right now, safe, supported, et cetera, or something else?
so I was thinking about the district priority measures.
The document itself.
Yeah, the 7,
Okay.
so kind of going down on each one. Keeping in mind that this dashboard idea is actually number 6 on the list. So wanted to share this with you as just an idea of how that might come to life, knowing that ours could be very different, but I thought it could be a helpful representation of a direction that we might go in that regard.
And you already said this, but I do want to reiterate in case people didn't hear that these are not our data. This is a
Right.
mock-up of an idea that doesn't really apply to us. We're just saying these are the kinds of things we could do just for the public. In case they see it, I don't want there to be this sense of, oh, did we measure that? These are not our measurements. It's somebody else's sample. essentially.
Right, exactly.
I have another clarification.
Sure.
So is this dashboard like a poster, or is it dynamic on the website? Is it, so when we're looking at this, this is potentially something that would be posted on the school office walls? Like, I'm trying to get an understanding of if we create this, where does this go? Who's seeing this?
Yeah, I think it could be in a variety of places. We haven't determined that yet, but I think the idea is really if we were to take our measures that we agree upon, district priority measures, and perhaps pieces that we have identified from the LCAP, and we merge that into a dashboard that would be visible to our community, what would we hope that would look like? What would be on it? What kinds of things? Of all the things that we're measuring and doing, all throughout the year, we remember our LCAP was, like 300 pages long. Lots of things in there. We see certain pieces from the LCAP measures and from the district priority measures that we would want to capture in a visual way to share with our community as an evidence of progress.
Yeah, and typically, yes, it would be posted online, and often they're done where you can click on it, and it can actually take you into more explanation. So there's ways of doing it like that. You could also still do, if you wanted to, a stagnant one or whatever. But that's to be determined, and that's one thing we need to work on and decide. We don't have an answer to it, but your comments on it are going to help us do that.
So the idea, I'm not quite clear. The idea would be that it would, instead of safe, engage, support, and challenge, those headings would be related to our 6 or 7 priorities instead of those headings.
Right.
Is that what you think?
Yes, we could determine what the appropriate headings would be, using our priorities, using the LCAP, anchoring all of that in the strategic plan, and figure out what would be the most important measures that we would want to highlight on something like this, so that we could mark our progress along the way and celebrate together the accomplishments or highlight areas that we're going to work on next.
So would this be in addition to the GLOBE strategic plan visual? Is this a supplemental one?
Yeah, so let's take a step backward. Okay, we have a strategic plan, and everything from here on out we talked about has to align to that strategic plan. The LCAP, the SIPSs, so the GLOBE is just which we don't know we're going to keep anyway, it's a visual representation of that plan. Every year we set some priorities for shorter term measure of organizational success. So right now we have the preamble, we mentioned the LCAP, and then we pulled out some LCAP goals, and then we have 3 district priorities. So the things we would be measuring are related to that. These 7 items you're seeing up here are conceptual ways of measuring those 3 priorities, all of which are tied back to the strategic plan. Everything goes back to that. When we came up with these, they were in relation to the question, in order to make good progress in the way we want to toward the strategic plan, what are some high-level priorities we want to have so that we hold ourselves accountable for making progress? So that's what these district priorities are. They're not different, they're not new, they're not outside of them. And we don't have a set of goals specific to every part of the strategic plan because it's a 50,000 level document, right? It's not at that level. So this is a way of bringing it to areas of focus for the next year or two.
Any other comments, questions, ideas?
So,
Lori?
okay, I too want to clarify. So this really is just number 6 standalone, right? We're not trying to incorporate 1 through 7 into this. This is just number 6 of creating a dashboard that's representative of our kiddos and what we're accomplishing with them.
So it's number 6, but I think also there could be some crossover, right? Like looking at something like
Number 4.
Yeah.
So number 4, up there, baseline data to better understand staff beliefs and needs. We could easily have an area that is what do employees of CUSD have to say in which we would be measuring something and we could report out on that. That could be something that's on here conceptually. It's not likely we would do that with numbers 1, 2, 3. We're guessing unless you have a different idea because those are less progress measures. Whereas we want to track over the years what is staff and or parent input around various parts of the district. So yes, we could add those in here. But we're just saying that if we had this to go over, we would have taken item 6 out of here as one of 7 things, and we would have said that's just a way of representing the measures we actually want to do. So that's how we're looking at this.
So I guess my feedback on that, do you want feedback now?
Well, it's a matter of whether we want to go 1 by 1 or to get feedback. Whatever your will is.
Okay, so I guess my feedback on that would be, as a receiver of this information, I love a dashboard format. I actually think that the way this one is laid out is actually could work really well for us as a communication tool, talking about our learners to our parents as an audience. As a receiver of that information, I don't know that I would necessarily, I almost would want a separate dashboard, sort of talking about some of the other things that aren't my learner, maybe about the district. Maybe there's a separate dashboard that is about sharing out or educating about, the financial situation and about, the work of our professionals and our different programs and things like that, versus this really, to me, is about our learners. And I think there's value in both, and I like the dashboard format, but I don't know that I don't know that I can wrap my head around how that would come together and that it would make sense to me in terms of the story you were trying to tell me if you were pulling in different pieces, but maybe I'd have to see it to know. But that's sort of my initial, if I'm getting this as somebody who, my kid is enrolled in the school, but maybe I'm not, maybe I'm seeing some of this for the first time.
Can I respond to that? Because I think I'm having kind of a similar reaction to it, and I think part of it is something, when you look at something like this, what you're expecting to see is like an info sheet or an infographic of some kind, but what you're saying is a dashboard, which if I think of my car dashboard, it's telling me, how low I am on gas or how fast I'm going, so the dial is constantly changing, right, or the speed is changing or whatever. And so to me, the question still is, who is that information relevant to? So the kind of dashboard information, if it's supposed to be district priorities, then the people paying attention to that dashboard aren't necessarily going to be the wider community audience, I think. So like what you said, if it's a parent, as a parent, if I'm receiving this information, I want to know the info, like the, whatever, how many schools are in the district, or our financial situation is, how many students we have, how many, that kind of thing, right? Versus like the dashboard, which I don't know if all the effort needs to be put into a graphic for it. I mean, I don't know how much work would go into that. Like whether it's, I mean, it could be something that could be easily changeable, like with updated, like on the California dashboard for the schools and how that changes with the green measures, bars going up and down. It's more dynamic.
Maybe it's even just two-sided, where one side is more about the learners and the learning, and one side is more about the district demographics and financials and. Yeah.
Okay. I actually like this a lot. I think we've done the strategic plan, and maybe I'm reading more into this, and so I'm imagining something that I wanted to see, which is basically the implementation of that strategic plan. And I see this as sort of capturing these measures along the way. And so that's the way I would pitch it to the parents, is that we have a strategic plan, we're implementing it right now, and these are some of the specific measures. I understand the point about wanting some of that demographic, but there's also another state-mandated dashboard, the California school dashboard, which people will get from the state. So I actually like the fact that this is particular to our particular priorities. I actually like these graphics. It does cost money, I guess, to make it. But I'm hoping we do that once and then we just plug in the numbers in so we can amortize that over some time. I think my discussion really is, I would agree with Craig. When I saw the priorities, I don't think number 6 dashboard, that should be a priority. I think because that's the mechanism. So I actually think 7 should be too, but we could talk about that later. So generally, I'm supportive of this. The way I look at it is basically a way to inform the community on how we're executing on our the different aspects of our strategic plan. I wonder if we should talk about how often we update this. Should there be an online version, or are we looking at maybe PDFs that come out, I don't know, once a semester or so? But I like that because one of the things that's been thinking about with the strategic plan is then when we implement that, how do we be accountable to the community and what we're doing? And so I had sort of linked the two. I don't know if this is the intent or not, but so thanks.
And I guess to respond to what you're saying too, in my mind, like if you say that this is a representation of the strategic plan, I don't know why, I have to think more about why I feel differently about it than I do these priorities, but I do feel differently about it. Okay. If you're saying these tie into aspects of our strategic plan, that I'm able to conceptualize a little bit more. I don't know that I'm able
so
to
I think I just to a little more clarity here. So these are not priorities. That's not what this is. The priorities are these 3, along with this is the district priority. We said one way of measuring, in fact, all of these that were here used to be embedded as examples of conceptually what we might want to measure to show engagement of broad set of stakeholders. So we would have something in here that would talk to what's the measure that says, oh, you've had how many, what's the metric that says that we're doing that. And then embedded in this too is this question of consistency. So there's a question of, well, what do we mean by that, and how would we measure it, right? So I just want to be clear. Down here, we're just conceptual ideas about kinds of ways of thinking about coming up with measures, concrete ones, which these are not right now, those measures, but it's coming up with the, like if we scroll up on that, can we please? Is that you, Jeff? Or the other way, I think. Thanks. So those are the 3 priorities, right? That we're saying we're going to focus on because, and again, if you look at the LCAP, if you look at the census, if you look at everything we're doing within the district, if you look at all the things we do like enrollment data, et cetera, then we have literally thousands of things that we could do. We're not going to do everything. And so this exercise is about saying, up against our strategic plan, in order to say we're at least making enough progress and we feel good about it, here's some things we really want to make headway in, and so how are we going to measure it? It's not how do we measure everything. We added that we know that we will and have to measure these things. If you go to the bottom, to the 3rd one, do you mind? Okay. So there is one more. Yeah, so So then there's this set that speaks to the things that we said we would be measuring in terms of student outcomes. So yeah, we could have a set of student outcome things that we're going to report on because we have to do that, right? And so why not do it and report out to the community, put it on their dashboard, have it interactive on the website or in some way, right? And then so that's the idea. So I do think there's just some confusion about what we're trying to do here. This is an exercise we do annually around district priorities in which we limit ourselves to not everything we know we want to do, but what are a few areas that we want to pay attention to say over the course of the year when it's all said and done, when we look at all the measures, thousands of them that we have, we're really going to concentrate on a few as an organization and say, are we making good progress in these areas? Because they are the things that are actually key to some of the stuff we have in our strategic plan.
So I feel like I understand the exercise, but I don't know that I understand where we started with number 6 here. And at one point I thought I heard the 1 through 7 was ending up in here, but now you're saying no, it's the 1 through 3. No,
I said both. I didn't say either. I said one thing you could have in here, and I gave you examples of these 7. There are samples that we could also put in here. We put the measures of what our teacher feedback saying. What I'm saying is that this was intended, I think what Allison was pointing out is, if you just kind of think about this in a big picture, not the detail, is this the kind of format that we would like to have to communicate in a way that would be useful for everybody? And now, if so, we need to agree on what are the things we're measuring. What are the concrete things, ultimately, relative to the 3 priorities, are we saying we absolutely want to have in here? It doesn't have to be inclusive. I mean, all of it. All inclusive, right? But we have to have a way of measuring this stuff. Otherwise, like, what's the purpose of saying 3 priorities? And that could be a conversation. You might want to say, yeah, why do we do that? Why do we not do that? Let's do something else. That would be fine to say. I'm just saying this has been our practice, is to always say what are our 1 to 2 year priorities that we can stay focused on, that we don't, because from our perspective, the number of data points that come across in any given year about what people want to measure, whether it's units of study reading, is it math, is it at what level, is it, is it the pathways or is it the outcome? There are thousands of these, right? And so you have to have a way to say, well, what do you as a board hope that we will pay attention to first and foremost?
So I'll just wrap on my thought here and then I'm going to let somebody else talk. That makes perfect sense to me. If we can start the conversation with the priorities and the measures, I'm good to go there. I'm not understanding this, and that may be because we haven't had that conversation yet, just for me to even be able to conceptualize what you're talking about here.
But I don't see this as a measure. I see this as a communication tool.
It's a format, yeah. That's all it is.
So you measure somewhere else, and you put the data in here for parents or community members or whoever.
Right.
To figure out what we're doing. Is that correct?
Right, so it sounds to me like this is only adding a layer of confusion to the conversation, and it's not helpful, so I say ignore it.
Well, now wait a minute. I want to get back to some things Jerry said earlier. You were talking earlier about, in the implementation plan, making certain that the strategic plan is clear at the parent-student level in the schools, so that it's not this 50,000-foot look for people who are wondering what's happening with my kid and how does this. So I wonder if this would be a way to communicate that.
That's what I was thinking. One of the questions I had is whether or not it would be viable to customize this. So there's a section in here that's targeted at the school. So you have district information, and if we happen to have metrics that are school specific, then you have 25 different versions or something, so we should talk about that. So just make it some of it local and more relevant, I guess, to the parents. But we should talk, that's what, so yeah, so I was thinking whether or not to customize it for a school by swapping out a section. And then to your point, Phyllis, that's what I was thinking, was this would be the communication vehicle. How are we doing on the strategic plan? So that's how I had visualized it.
So I don't think we want to hang it up yet, but I think we need a lot more discussion about it.
Yeah, no, I wasn't saying let's not do it. I was saying in order to move through a conversation, if we can just say maybe we come back to this, because it's really the form of doing something. It's not the purpose. It's a way of sharing data in a way that may be digestible by community. So I didn't want to get hung up on that. We were just trying to say a way of thinking about it and visualizing it. So I think it's more important to ask the question, are these kinds of things, just taking one at a time. The notion of, and because, remember, these are things that have come out in conversations from you all. This isn't like we're just pulling it out of somewhere, and from community. So number one is a successful shift in and consistency of master schedule and electives offerings across all middle schools. And note that we have talked a lot about equity, and we make it really clear, we're not talking about cookie cutter schools where everybody does the same thing. We don't want that. Equity doesn't mean the same, everybody doing the same thing. It's equitable, meaning there will be changes that are based on the needs of the school for very good reason. That's okay to have. But there are some things that we've all said ought to be a little more consistent than they are, so that if you happen to live across the street from somebody, literally, or next door to you in some cases, and they go to this middle school, but I go to this one, but the offerings were wildly different. That is a different thing from having to be exactly the same. That's not what we're talking about. I believe this is something that has come up from you all. I use it as an example. It's probably more of a either we do it or we don't kind of measure, as opposed to a progress measure. Either we do feel like, yeah, we're making some progress for creating appropriate, equitable programming, and not cookie cutter. And how would we know that, right? So what I would love to hear from you all is this still an important priority, and / measure toward a priority? And if so, what concretely would you want to see? And then I know we have one card you might want to take. I don't know if you want that.
So the speaker that we have is speaking to this particular priority. Do we want to hear from her now?
I like
You
it.
guys good with that? Okay, Kim?
So it actually goes with number one.
Right.
So, I just happened to, Kim James, I just happened to jump on to look at when our next board meeting was. So I started looking through the calendar and started looking through the agenda, and that's when I first saw 9.1. So then I just kept looking, and I'm like, oh, 11.1, what's this? I actually printed it and highlighted it. District priority 1, in my mind, along with being in the middle schools, with the priority measure number 1, I just wanted to make sure that the board is aware that when you state engage with a broad set of stakeholders, and you already mentioned not making it cookie cutter, but making it equitable. So we understand, as I've been in the district for 22 years, so I know that our middle schools are not the same, and that's what makes this all unique. But we also talk amongst each other, and we know that our instructional minutes are slightly different, and our prep time minutes are slightly different, and our overall schedule is slightly different, with some having blocks and some not having blocks, and some having 7 periods and some having 7 periods with an optional 0. So yes, there's a lot. But I just wanted to make sure that due to things that have happened in the past with, and I can mention to you guys, our former superintendent, Phil Bragg, I just want to make sure that we do engage a broad set of stakeholders and make sure that this is a well thought out priority when you come in number 1. That's all.
Thank you, Kim. More comments? On anything more on number 1?
I have a couple, but I have to
Okay. Talker tonight. So up top in the preamble, we're talking about working towards more of or thinking perhaps in a 2-year sort of time frame, and I recognize that sometimes we're going to have measures that will span that whole 2 years, and sometimes we'll have measures that will only span 1 year, and sometimes it'll be sort of phases of one and then a second. Just because it's saying shift and we're titling it in a 1920, that seems like a really ambitious timeline to me. And so I shared with Dr. Baker that I don't know that that's necessarily the right goal for a 1-year goal. Like, I can see that as maybe a 2-year goal, but a 1-year goal might be starting to, and we talked, Dr. Baker and I know a lot about, maybe year one is more about doing the engagement, a really robust engagement across a variety of stakeholders, and starting the conversation around what's good for kids in our middle schools and what's already working really well in our middle schools, and figuring out, which schools have which pieces, is it block, is it electives, is it instructional minutes, is it prep time, is it, all of those different things, and then figuring out what's working well for kids, what's supporting kids, and start the conversation around what would a shift look like to provide equity and consistency in year 2. Was kind of where my mind went with that.
Yeah, and I can say, I'm glad you raised that. We were trying not to be presumptuous that it's 2 years, we've always done these in 1 year, but I think I did, and I put it in the cover of this, and I mentioned it to all of you. We feel like some of these things, frankly, there's some things that we would have benchmarks even just a few months from now, and we want to see progress, and others are at the end of the year, others are by next winter, and others by the end of next year. And that's how we're looking at it. I mean, we were imagining basically using our advances as a time to look at the data and say, have we met certain benchmarks at this time? So that is a part of what, for number 1, for example, I would want to hear. I'm trying to get from you, what would you want to see specifically to feel like we made some good progress? I don't want to force you to say something you don't necessarily know, but if you can tell us, we want to be able to go off and write this up in a way that's more tangible and concrete what we're talking about. So what we were looking for tonight is, in this area, I would feel happy if by blank date we had this, and maybe by this date, next year, whatever. What does that look like? And I think we know it's not that our goal is not cookie cutter schools for us, but that's not what we're looking for, right? But if that's not what we're looking for, what is it we're looking for? That would help us make measures.
So what I would like to see, I think, is something similar to the process that we used for the strategic plan, where Allison's team brings groups of people together, sort of a focus and flare concept, but maybe not quite in the same way because it's different. But I will have to say I was disappointed in the participation that we had in those focus and flares, because often we had more staff and we had, I don't know how we fix that, or if we do. This topic of any changes in the middle school has been a hot topic in this district in the past. So I'm guessing we would bring people out for it, but I don't know. But so my progress would be, in this first year, have we done what Lori described? Have we brought people together? Have we begun to develop something that looks like a plan that would accomplish the goal of equity for kids? Maybe instructional minutes, maybe not, but some way that when a kid comes to school in Cupertino to a middle school, they have equal opportunity.
I'm sharing my 2 cents here. So I think it would echo a lot of what Lori and Phyllis shared. For me, I think this would start with getting information out there about our 5 middle schools, which we can talk about what the characteristics are, the electives, the instruction hours, and all that sort of thing. Because my sense from talking to just parents I talk to randomly is that there's an awareness that the middle schools are different, but there's not really an awareness how they're different. And human nature being human nature, people feel like the school that they're at is not as good as the other 4 schools they're not at. And so I think if that's something that we can shoot for, let's say if you start a clock at, in the September, I guess we're in September now, right? Maybe in the first couple of months, get that information out there, I guess. Kind of like what we do strategically, first we get information out there. And then have a series of these engagement with the stakeholders. I think that wouldn't run past until the end of the semester. I think the timeline that Lori had brought up is we sort of do this planning in that first year. And so for me, it would be getting the information out there, let it kind of go out there, and then maybe in the spring timeframe, have a set of these discussions with the staff, the teachers, the parents, and maybe even talk to the kids to see what they feel. But then I would like it. I would be happy if we were ready to execute on some pilot of this come the start of the 2nd school year. It doesn't have to be a full rollout. I don't know what that would look like, but if we can put something in place so we can start learning from whether or not that would work. So that's, for me, that would be happiness. All right.
I agree with everything that's been said, and just to build upon that, I would add the engagement of the teachers, the staff at each of the sites, not just everyone at that site, but across the sites. So I'm thinking, for example, like all PE teachers, like at all 5 sites, talking together, getting a chance to share about best practices. So as they do, especially because that's when all the after-school sports teams start in middle school, and it's really big, and that's where a lot of that school spirit comes from and the rivalries come from. And so something where there's not just, if we're talking about what's measurable, then it's being able to look and say that we're doing the site meetings, series of site meetings with an integrated group of teachers and staff and parents, but then also across departments.
So those are all helpful pieces for us.
Okay, anything else on number one?
Yeah, I would just add, I think, maybe to what Jerry's saying in terms of, I do see that opportunity to share with the community, like what does your mix of pieces look like right now? But then also that can become the source of a conversation of, and what do you like about it, what's working well for you, and what do you not and what's not, or would you like to see change? Or because I think it would be helpful, like at the sites right now that have block schedules, what do they like about the block schedules and what don't they, versus at the sites that don't have block schedules right now, you know, there's perhaps a different question that can be posed that solicits some different information about, you know, why that does or doesn't work for them. So I think using getting the information out there, but as a vehicle for a wider conversation, and I think that absolutely applies, I think, to families and students, but also to our teachers and to our leadership staff to have a conversation. I love Sylvia's idea about pulling in different cross-sectional groups to sort of have some conversations, because I would have to think that if I put myself in the role of somebody who's at a site that does it one way, I may not fully understand. I may have fears around doing it a different way, but that may be because I don't understand the positives and negatives of that other way. So there would be some good conversations there too. So I think all of that would make me happy if we had those conversations in year one, so that then by year two, I think then you're creating this new idea of a new master schedule and elective offerings with some consistency around there that is really mindful to all of that. I would be okay if we piloted, and I would be okay if we weren't ready to pilot next year. I don't feel as strongly about that so much, just because I want that to be based on whether or not we think we're ready for that. I would hate to say we're ready for a pilot if we're not. So, vice versa, I think if we're ready for a pilot, I think that would be a great opportunity too. So.
Sorry, can I just clarify? Are we talking about number one, priority number one, or number one, priority measure number one?
One that's up there, the measure. At the specific measure that is tied to priority number one, but is a measure.
All right, just what I thought, but it's not clear.
Okay, do you have enough information about
I think so.
one? Now, on number two, I think that's going to grow out of the committee that's working on it, so I'm not sure we need to talk about that here. That will come up later.
Probably not, and
Because we're going to have a report from that committee, right?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that when we get to the committees a little bit, but I think we've already established that, because we said this last year, and this is just a confirmation that we said that by the end of this school year, we want to have a firm plan for what we're going to do about our enrollment imbalance situation. So that's kind of a...
So that's a measure. We don't have a plan, we don't.
But now I can get more specifics to that when we talk.
So there's an enrollment update in our agenda packet,
Yes.
so I was just wondering why that's there. Are we going to talk about this?
We wanted to do that as part of the committee.
Oh, committee. All right, okay, thank you.
I just have one more thought for number one. Can I go back for just
sure.
one sec? I'm sorry, Phyllis. So I know sometimes, because I think a lot of the conversation and engagement may be at the middle school level, I just want to make sure that at some point we have a plan or thought to how we're going to communicate that down to the elementary school level, because I think sometimes when things are being talked about up here, there's sometimes going to be a potential for a misunderstanding of when change is coming or what changes are being made. That can create sort of an unnecessary sense of anxiety. So just making sure that even though the conversation may be taking place up here, that we've got a good communication channel.
Relative to number one.
Relative to number one.
Got it.
Thank you.
Okay, so number three, Is that coming up for us later, or do we need to talk about that now, Craig?
3.
Progress toward
Measure number 3.
representative organization toward the coalition?
I mean, for me, the question here is this something, do you see this as a priority? Number one, that you want us to measure building big picture, the CUSD 25 in it together, and making progress?
So I guess, fellas, may I?
Go ahead.
Okay. So when I saw this, I had sort of 2 questions. One was around how much influence this, because a lot of this is CEIF and CUSD 25, and so what is our role in what they're doing, because they're fundraising, and so I wanted to kind of get some clarification, because clearly you have something in mind putting that here. Second is that we talked about CUSD 25 also as a mechanism to build community, right? Not just a fundraising vehicle. And so we have a measure, we have a financial measure here, and I wonder if we should add in a measure around community engagement, whether it's volunteer hours or number of programs or something that highlights that aspect of CUSD 25 that we're trying to hit, that community building part, and not just financial. So those were the 2 questions that came up for me when I looked at this.
That's right.
And to respond to your question about does it need to be a priority, I think it does. I think it needs, my opinion is it needs to be one of our priorities, related to what Jerry just said, but also related to our ability to increase funding. So any other comments on number 3?
When I read this number, what number 3 made me think was, I know we mentioned resources of a district priority 2, but I don't think we necessarily have a district priority anymore, correct me if I'm wrong, that's sort of calling out, I hate the word budget, but any aspect of sort of our financial picture. And I know that that is embedded in all 3 of these, but I don't know if we want language in there that specifically calls that out as a priority or not. Or
I think our thinking, I'm trying to go back to what we were thinking at the time, and going up to the district priority number 2, we talked about maximizing resources in order to, for these conditions. So I think that's where it started, right? And we had said we had as a goal the last 3 years something around balancing the budget, right? And recognizing that we need to increase revenue or decrease costs, one way or the other, we have to balance that budget. We felt like, we're kind of down that road, and that's just kind of what we do now. We do it every single year. It's not necessarily special anymore that we have to make that happen. That's what we have to do every single year. We didn't know if we call that out as the item, but so I'm actually rethinking this one in terms of it being a financial measure. It's really more, are we building that sense that we're in it together? Our business is getting more and more involved with this. Are more and more parents engaged regardless of the funding? Because I actually trust that that eventually converts itself to supporting the schools in all ways, which will be financial. So maybe we want to do more measures that look at how do we know we're building such a coalition of parents who are getting together across all 25 sites. I think it's probably the real thing.
Right, measures like participation in parent support organizations, programs that are put on. I think maybe not all of these are necessarily directly driven by the district, but I think these are measures of how involved the community is with our school runs. And so I almost rather see that prioritized. I'm not against having a financial measure, but I'm just thinking that other one feels more important to me. So.
Okay, can we move on to number 4? Baseline data to better understand staff beliefs and needs.
Sure. So I think this is really important, right? Because I'm very supportive of this. This should be there. My one ask would be because if we get a survey result and it says 85, I don't know what 85 means, and so having some context around if we measure something, if there's any way to find out what our peer districts are like, to provide some, so that's the ask, provide context in addition to our measurements. Otherwise, what does 85 mean? Whatever that is hard to say. Right. So. And then, just one more. Right. It is. And I know there are privacy issues, but as much granularity as we can get on these sort of things. So being able to know how our teachers, for instance, at a particular school feels would be a lot more useful, it seems to, than sort of an aggregate number at the district level, but I understand there are also concerns too. So I'll leave it to you folks to work out what's the right level. As much data as we can get would be best, but certainly respect what, what staff is comfortable with.
Sylvia, do you have anything on this topic? Lori?
I think my only thought when I read this one was data from sort of a standpoint of, like to Jerry's point, numeric versus more sort of, I almost feel like surveying sort of what are your priorities and just sort of an open-ended question of,
And yet narrative rather than...
Yeah, well, I hate to ask anybody to spend a lot of time, narrating and then also the back end of processing through all that. I don't know if there's a smarter way to capture some of that, but just maybe to get some sort of idea of the staff beliefs and needs around what they see as priorities right now for kids and for the district, just as another measure. That may help inform some of our decision making, I guess. But that was, I don't know if I'm doing a good job of articulating that, but I guess I had a similar concern to Jerry in terms of data. I remember a previous survey, and I don't remember the exact wording, but there was a survey that was a couple years ago, and the wording was something like, I'm very satisfied, I'm partially satisfied, I'm neutral, I'm partially unsatisfied, and the top two categories of satisfied and partially satisfied kind of got lumped together as one number of this is everybody who's satisfied with where the district is at right now. And I thought that wasn't nuanced enough because everybody's going to have a different definition of sort of what is partially satisfied, right? That means there's some things that I'm happy with and some things that I'm okay with, and there's value in knowing what both of those things are. So maybe that's, I don't know if narrative is the right word, but at least a little bit more concrete than just a numeric or a scale.
Okay.
So you're talking about having literally numeric text, sort of, as opposed to just
Yeah, I know there's a tool out there that can pull keywords.
Like sentiment analysis, for instance.
Yes, sentiment analysis. There you go.
Yes.
Thank you, Jerry. leave it to our research lab guy.
Okay, I'm going to push us to number 5.
So my feedback on this one is very much in favor of it. I think one thing I wanted to kind of call out is if we can include some more clear-cut directions for sharing of best practices across sites so that it's, and I guess it's somewhat connected to number 3 in terms of becoming more fully functioning a body of qualifying high school sites. So to give you an example, like I attended a few different back to school nights, and they were all really great, but they were all so different. And there was one school that did something that I thought was genius, which was the principal put up photos of the secretaries and just said, this is Mrs. So-and-so, and this is Mrs. So-and-so, and this is what their jobs are, and this is who you go to if your child is not going to come in. And I just thought, oh, this is genius, right? like, oh, you should tell other people that you're doing this, because what a great idea, right? But there's no venue, there's no format, forum for them to share those kinds of things that they're doing. So it's not necessarily like, or even just with like doing working on the SIPSAs, right? I know all the principals got together in the room and worked together, but my understanding is they were pretty much just working on their own things together. They weren't really sharing with each other. Like, oh, what did you write for this? Or how are you formatting this? Or how are you doing this? So more of a maybe not formal, well, maybe a formalized way to allow folks at the different sites to be able to share their great ideas.
Okay, so the question I think that Craig is asking is, what would we see for number 5 that would convince us that there are practices in place to support this?
So for me, it would be maybe some examples of, I guess what would make me happy on this one is to see some examples of ways that we are collecting evidence and then using it. And then maybe an additional step on that would be if we're modifying or tweaking it based on what we're learning from that. I think sometimes we collect data and we are using it really effectively, and sometimes we're collecting data and maybe we're finding that even though we're going through the process of it, it's not as useful to us. And so maybe some sort of evidence around our learning from that process, and are there things we're learning that we think it's more efficient to let that go, and which ones we're keeping and why, and how they're helping us to go through, kind of our strategic plan of personalizing and individualizing what we're doing for kids. So I guess maybe not just evidence of what systems and practices we have in place, but maybe what we have in place and what's working well for us, and then ones that we're either tweaking or even letting go because they're less valuable than something else.
Okay. Do you have information that you need?
Just something to share here. So I like the idea of improvement. But in a previous life, I've worked in an environment where a culture of continuous improvement became a culture of continuous change. Because it's hard to tell if you're improving, but you can tell if you're changing. And so just continuously changing, and then so that, I guess it's hard when things keep changing in the name of being improvement. And the other thing, by the way, I like this. So I'm not again just sort of maybe throwing out some of the cautions from what I've experienced. Is we want to make sure we have a way of measuring improvement in a real quantitative way that everybody agrees. The other thing with database decision making is that there's often a cost to collecting that data, and so something for us to think about. If it's something we can get out of our IT systems, that's great. If it's something where the teachers have to fill out a little sheet every week or something, that's probably less so. And so I think overall my ask for this would be the evidence that we collect should be evidence of improvement in whatever it is we're improving, rather than a system and a process being in place, right? So let's say we're trying to make lunch better. I'd like to have some measure, so maybe make the lunch line shorter or something, as opposed to, oh, we put in a new process now. All the kids line up, a reverse alphabetical or something. So does that make sense? So sort of measure the end result of what it is we're trying to improve, as opposed to just saying we have systems and practices in place. Does that make sense? Craig, you look a little puzzled.
What I'm reflecting on is how much definition we need to this one. And just to give a little context, I think what was for us, when EC went around to all the schools for the last couple of years and my participation in that, what I heard a lot from pretty much every single site that we went to was, the district is asking us to fill out all these data points, and we're not even sure how we use it. In the end, it goes into a black hole, so what's the purpose? And it feels like a waste of time. Right? So I think the idea was, but we believe in using data to inform our instruction, and I think everyone says, yeah, but it has to be useful. Why are we doing things that we don't think we're actually going to look at? So I think it's really about making it, what is the evidence that we have in place, systems and practices that are useful, right? That are supporting a culture, not just to collect data so that it's in a box, but it's
so actually using data
informs something, what evidence do we have of that. So I think we need to kind of work on this to define it in a way that reflects a little bit more of that, because that's what it was meant to do.
That makes sense to me then. I think I've heard some of the things also, fill all these forms, what happens to it. But and what you're saying is then we're going to put in practices to actually make use of it, Well, presumably not, if you're not going to.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Okay.
So is it really evidence of the systems and practices then, or is it evidence that the systems and practices have good buy-in for practical usage?
I would say yes, it is evidence of, I mean, evidence of the systems there, but they have to be useful systems, and that they are useful, right?
Okay.
Because you don't want to have one without the other. You want
Evidence that they
play.
exist, evidence that they're useful, and evidence that they're used.
I could maybe give one example that I don't know if this will end up being one of the particular measures, but something that's real and relevant right now for us is we have our new units of study reading curriculum. The district for many years has used an assessment tool that results in a reading level, but prior to the units of study, the instructional material didn't match up. It wasn't matched with the level. So we had the assessment system where the teachers were entering it, but the tools we gave them, it didn't fit as a system. But now, our assessment and the materials work together, so the teachers give the assessment and then they can pull a material that matches the student's need. So what you were saying about where is it going into the black hole, is it working as a system as part of the instructional process in the classroom is one way of looking at that. And then on a broader view, we have committed to focusing time regularly at the principal's meeting for learning about improvement tools. How do we reflect on our progress? How do we use processes to guide facilitated discussions with staff so that they can find meaningful information in the data that we're collecting? So all of these things are a part of what we've been thinking and planning, and our principals expressed to us last year, let's have more time to work together to share our leadership strategies, share protocols for how to make sense of all the data that comes to us every week. So we've already started that work, and I think I'm seeing it at that systems level related to the SIPSAs and the LCAP, but also at the classroom level for teachers. We have a few areas like the one I mentioned where I think we're ready to make some progress on, knowing that this is a journey, a multi-year journey. But yeah, trying to make the pieces work as a system and support student learning is really what we're talking about.
Anything else on number 5? We're going to skip 6 because we already did it. And we're going to 7.
One thing I want to say about number 7, that as Allison was giving that example, I realized that if you make that number 7 indented A, B, part of the A, B, those are all examples actually of evidence of a system of practice in place. It's just that this is more focused on principle, a toolbox for leadership to do. So maybe we want to combine all those, number 5 in some way as evidence of the systems we're talking about that add to this continuous improvement.
Is the focus on 7 the principal's use of tools or the support for social emotional learning and school climate? I had read number 7 as being that was the key and everything else supported that. Or that's why I thought maybe there are 2 different goals here. Principals using tools and positive school climate.
I think our original thinking on that is that going back to the original priorities, that building the site-based leadership around places where we know there's a lot of energy through the SIPSA work and all those collaborative conversations towards the strategic plan. We have that on B there. We know that the areas of social emotional learning and positive school climate, that's something that's common across all schools. There's so much energy and work already happening. So that would be a place where thinking about our priorities and the strategic plan and the whole child, that feels like definitely something that we could make a lot of progress on, because everyone's already down the path and we have already been using a rubric self-reflection tool with the principals. So of all the many things that we're doing related to that, that felt like a concrete step for this year. And then beyond that, thinking about the implementation of our strategic plan, how I think about it is we sort of reset how we define success with the strategic plan. And now we're in this year of, okay, let's get our baseline tools in place for how we're going to measure that. And so we'll need to have some conversations around
what else do we need in our toolbox so that we can measure our progress towards those broader goals. And that supports site leadership, because we know that the best kind of change happens when we have that guiding vision, but the principals have a chance to lead and work with their staff and be on different paths that are leading in the same direction. So the thinking there is, what are the kinds of tools that we would want to bring to the forefront that would help us measure all of the things we said we wanted for our kids? And there could be different directions that we're going to go with that, but I think we need to talk to the principal about what kinds of things that might be. Districts have things like rubrics for measuring. How do we know if the kids are demonstrating collaboration or creativity? Those kinds of things. So we just have to work with the principals to figure out what are the tools we need for this spot in our journey. And we're sort of shoring up what will our dashboard be, to use that term again. We're in that year of resetting our measures. So to Craig and Jerry's point, I almost feel like 5 and 7, the actual text of 7, not the A and B, are sort of one goal together. And then I feel like 7B is actually its own goal, with A as sort of a supporter of B.
Right.
So I think you have a separate social emotional one around the tools and the systems and the supports, and maybe with the principles. Yes. And then the separate one is the evidence-based database.
Because if you couple site leadership with school climate, how do you measure? You like to be able to measure them independently, and I can imagine progress being made independently. And so for me, that would be the criteria for making them two different goals, because they're not coupled, right? You could push them one, so.
And maybe your evidence one has a separate sort of classroom-based versus site-based to tease out sort of the different pieces there, just the same way your social emotional one would have the drafting, the rubric, and tools. No, go ahead.
I don't know. I'm not comfortable with combining 5 and 7, because I feel like the evidence of the principals leading is different. I mean, it should be its own thing, because evidence of practices in place to support the culture can also be at the district office level in terms of how they're supporting the sites too. It feels like if it's focused on the principals, then it's this whole thing of we're expecting the principals to execute all these things.
So I guess
what I heard,
How about this? How about we let them, the staff, work on that for us and bring it back to us next time? I think we have a lot of ideas around that they can wrestle with. Did you have something else you wanted to add?
I guess I look at to me, the measures are more systemic and broad, and maybe it needs the different pieces, like you're saying, underneath it. But overall, do we want this district as a measure for this next year to look at how we're incorporating evidence and systems, evidence of our systems and our tools and our all of those things, and then maybe one part of that is principles, one part of that is culture, one part of that is classroom-based, but as pieces to support the measures in different areas. But yes, I'm fine with them taking.
You guys good with that? Having them take it and bring back something different or to us? Okay, so I think if there's nothing else to add, we are done with this discussion. Thank you. That was great. I'm sure good feedback to everybody. Thanks, Allison. Board policy. Leslie, do you have anything to say to us about board policy? Okay, so this is discussion. Food service operations, 3551. Any comments about that?
Were we going to talk about the enrollment document you shared at all?
I made a mistake and had to put it in the wrong area. I want to do that one during the committee's conversation to understand what the committees are looking at.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Okay.
There's a little confusing.
Okay, so I'm going on to 11.3, free and reduced price meals. Any comments or questions or discussion about that? All right, so these are discussion items. I assume, Leslie, they're going to come back to us at the next meeting?
Yeah, they come back on consent, if that's okay with you.
You guys good with that? Come back on consent? 11.2 and 11.3? Okay, both of them.
Unless you guys find that you need to bring them to us otherwise for some reason.
Board committees, Craig?
Oh, here we are. Okay. Quick second. Okay. So I sent you all an email today just to give a little description of what we're doing. And in the covers for this one, I laid out the 6 committees, 5 of them that are continuing in some form or another, not exactly the same. For example, we started last year with facility master plan and enrollment as one, and so it shows us separating those out. A new one is the wellness committee, and that's what, I mean, we had a wellness committee, but it hasn't been a board committee. That one actually should probably be a board committee, I think. Yeah, so that one should actually be up in the upper one, I think. And we would need new members. But also, I just want to put out there, I was putting there who past members were, not an assumption that people would continue there. And I am hoping that as part of what we're going to talk about right now, we would ask the question, do we need that committee or not? Who should be on it? It doesn't have to be the same people if people want to switch around for some reason, etc. So my hope is that for each of these 6, anyway, that we have here, and then at the end, the last question I have up there after we answer these 4 questions, for each of these committees, at the end I want to ask, and is there something we should add that we haven't talked about yet? So,
And did you want to finalize our committee membership or wait until Satisha's here?
I think we should wait, but I think it's time for us to talk about it. People have interest in certain ones or whatever, but everyone's aware we don't want to do that without Satish, so we can have that conversation.
Okay.
So we're not making any decision on it today, just talking about them. My real goal is that it occurred to me last year that we did not have necessarily a conversation going into committees you're in about, so what is the expectation of what it is that you would be talking about? Because if you're on a committee, you're representing essentially the board in some way or another. So our thought was just to run through each of these and not spend a lot of time, but just get a sense of what you're hoping that the committee members would tackle over the course of the year in that committee, and or suggest, well, maybe we don't need it anymore, right? So if we could just start with Los Altos. Did you have any other intro to that? Los Altos 2x2, which did have Jerry and Lori were on that, and I know there's been a meeting this year earlier, right? So do you want to share any thoughts about where you are and what on the natural would be talking about?
So for Los Altos, and jump in anytime you want. For Los Altos 2x2, we do try to sort of just have a general share out each meeting where the city people are talking about sort of key things going on in the city, the district people are talking about sort of key things going on in the district. The focus of a lot of discussion is typically around, at least in the past couple of years, has been around safe routes to school and around specifically the Homestead Corridor, which goes through that attendance area and or is the only route to get to the middle school for that attendance area for that city. We have found that having the forum where both city staff and city council members, as well as the district staff and district board members, all sort of together, has really resulted, I think, in some meaningful improvements overall to the safety of the routes, and also some progress on some sort of hot spots that had been problems for many, many, many years, as well as sort of laying the foundation that I think ultimately led to getting the city picking up the crossing guards in full for the, so they're now paying the full, including the district portion, what used to be the district portion of the crossing guards this past year. So I feel like good progress is coming from it, and that would be the bulk of what we've been talking about.
So for 1 and 2 up there, basically you gave an update where we are, provided some purpose to it, a lot of which is just a Form 4 dialogue and hearing from one another what's going on.
And
your sense-
prioritizing. Yeah, I think
and
we prioritize what needs to be, what is the next step in the process to
Right, and I heard
have progress.
what you said, yes, feels important, we should continue it, that's kind of my takeaway there. Then from everybody, what about number 3, what specific concrete issues or topics? If not that, is there anything that, especially with you not having been on that committee so far, is there something on your mind that in terms of specifically Los Altos that you think would be good for us to tackle, or?
I'll just add something before we jump in. So Lori's been leading that. She's done a wonderful job of driving that committee. In fact, we had Fremont Union join the last meeting. So it's not, and they're coming to all the future meetings now, so it's really a 2x2x2. It's 2 cubed now rather than 2 squared. It's a very active set of parents who come, the community members, even though there's only one school there, are very, very engaged. So lots of stuff gets done and talked about. So just
one elementary school, but then that moves through to
right,
high school.
Right.
Yeah, the cross the jurisdictions.
Right. So, but I think right now my sense is most of the interest is around traffic, but safety.
Yep. As far as membership, I'm happy to continue to serve on the Los Altos School too.
I don't know. I'll just note that, so I've served on it. The only one, if you look at the assignments, that's on 2 of these 2x2s. And I think these 2x2s actually feel different than these other ones. So I'm very happy to shift my membership, should Phyllis or Sylvia or Satish, yes, thank you. No, intent. Satish would be interested in taking that on. So put that there. I'm happy to continue serving, but I think we had talked about this in way beginning of the year, so I just want to give other folks an opportunity to do this.
And what about Cupertino, Jerry?
Cupertino.
Before you do that, show from either of you, just, or anybody, again, is there anything specific, or are we good with the purpose and where we're going, the prioritizing that happens there? I just wondered, is there anything else, or is that good?
Okay, so Cupertino.
Right, so Cupertino, I think our first meeting of the year is going to be next Thursday. So we've had one last school year, and we didn't have one over the summer. We actually had a pretty in-depth discussion as to why are we here, because we had some questions from the city side of, well, you have a city manager and a superintendent, and they can talk, so why are the electeds getting together to talk? So we actually went through a bit of a sort of soul searching, I guess, and we came up with a couple of items. One is actually just a sort of a mutual update of interested news, because there are, particularly there's a lot of interest from the city council members who are serving on that council right now on school enrollment and budget issues, right? That kind of couples into a lot of decisions they're trying to make around main use. And I think, and so one bucket would be just mutual updates of the news of interest. Another one that we're talking about is basically talking about potential collaboration projects. So these aren't necessarily things that are at a stage that staff would execute on, but maybe before that. So for instance, school traffic, you can always talk about that, but I have an interest in looking at for instance, the field joint use agreement of facilities and really thinking about, because I feel like I've just been there a long time and really going back to some of the basics of why are we in this and what are the benefits of both sides, and really thinking through some of that. And so there's interest from, I guess, the city side, particularly one of the council members really wanted to help with our financial situation and wanting to understand better what are the things the city can do. And so the idea there is for us to kind of brainstorm and talk about potential projects, and if things start to kind of firm up, then we'll bring this back to the board to see if this is something we want to go forward on. And if we do, then we hand it over to Craig and Deb to sort of work through. Right. And then the third is, I guess related to the second, is really kind of envisioning, because we get caught in a lot of the day-to-day, so we're working on this and that, but if we were to kind of step back and envision how we see the city and the school district working together in the future, so sort of an envisioning kind of exercise to kind of go through. I guess like a strategic plan, but maybe including because the city has its own general plan 2040. They have a plan all the way out for the next 10 plus years. And just thinking about how the two can work together with respect to our strategic plan and the city's general plan. So that's where we are on that. So I think it is important. I think we, I talked about the topics. I'd like to continue to serve, at least for the next year, just because I live in Cupertino, and I think I can help get some of these initiatives off the ground. And won't speak for Satish since he's not here, but those are the 1 to 4, I guess.
So anybody want to weigh in on something specific you would want to see dealt with in Cupertino we'd like to do, or what Jerry explained?
And Jerry's on the right track.
And I appreciate that you're trying to keep that going, because I get the question of couldn't the staff just handle it, but I do feel like there's value here in the communication pathway, because I think you get the opportunity to educate them, they get the opportunity to educate you, and the next time they're in a conversation with a constituent, they're going to be better able to address the question that may very well benefit us by furthering the knowledge and understanding that's out there.
Right, because when I talk to folks, I think there's whether or not I'm deciding to sort of poll people I know, it's just a useful thing to have. And I think folks are surprised that we're not already doing this. I think people kind of see government with a big G, right? And it all works together, and they don't think about the different jurisdictions and all that. And so there's sort of a, well, you don't do this already, shouldn't it? So I used to be that, but I certainly understand that. So I think it's valid.
Good. All right.
Budget advisory.
Budget advisory.
This one, I guess, Jeff, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit to the purpose of the budget advisory, just as a, to cover that, or Laura, you can do that too, because you've been on it. The one thing, well, let's just start with that. We just talk about where we are and what we do.
Start and then I'll fill in.
Start.
So the purpose of budget advisory has really shifted in the last couple of years to having an opportunity to speak with our unions, having represented the board, community members, and then we have 3 site principals that sit on it, so that we can really get into where we are with our budget. We brought in Cooper Noodle to the program. Leslie sits on it too, because we not only are we focused on what we receive from the state, but it's also how we can grow our district and get that cost recovery, whether it's with facilities, all the way down to how are we spending, are we best spending our money the way that we should. It's a really quick version, but.
I would say, I'm going to kind of jump down to, do you have thoughts about membership, in that I personally have found it extremely valuable to sit on this committee, and I'm happy to give somebody else a turn. And my thinking around why is, a lot of the information that Jeff is presenting in budget advisory comes to us, maybe with a few tweaks because of the conversations, but you're going to get the same information either way. The difference is being in the space, particularly with the unions and the community members, you're hearing the same budget topic looked at, kind of slicing the pie or slicing it with, different viewpoints and through different lenses, and to get to hear different groups and their perspective on even the same exact topic or nuance of the way something's being presented or the way that they're thinking through that item has been super interesting and valuable to me. So I'm happy to continue on that one, but I'm also happy to give somebody else a try.
And I also found great value in it, and I'm happy to continue, but would be happy to let someone else take the spots.
Yeah, this is one of those, Jeff and I talked about this recently, that the budget advisory committees are kind of meant to turn over at least every 2 years, and where you have it where you do 2 years, but people roll off, so you always have new people, because it is an informative place, both directions. The district learns a real perspective, and we want people, community, to be part of it who haven't been, because they become knowledgeable, right? So, and it does feel like it's been a little bit, it had for years kind of rolled over, it was kind of the same people, and so I would say that if, we'll talk with Satish and all of you, if there's any interest to change up some of it, even if it's one of the two, it just might be good out of just good practice to do that.
Okay, facility master plan. Sylvia and Jerry.
Oh yeah, but we might talk a little bit about how we split that off, and I think it's a pretty short-term committee we're thinking at this point. But
Sure. So the facility master plan, last year the board approved LPA coming in and helping us build a facility master plan. And our focus on the facility master plan has shifted. It used to be you build a facility master plan, you run off that same plan for a number of years, you never go back and update it other than minor tweaks. What we're doing now is really getting this as being our baseline of the facility master plan, and then every year we can update it. And so with that concept, we weren't sure if it actually fell into the category of a superintendent committee versus a board committee with it. Right now, we do have board members on the committee to make sure that we bring that equity to the district, and we have a really good lens, and we're looking at all the needs, both infrastructure and the dreaming scenarios of it. And LPA is helping with not only that conversation, but also the community-wide engagement with it as well. And there's actually going to be an additional committee. There's two committees for it when you hear about it. There's our steering committee that's helping build how are we going to engage with our community. And then we're going to have a facilities committee that is community-wide. So we have both things taking place.
And are you looking for board representation on both of those committees?
We weren't necessarily, but it goes out to everyone. I think it being on the steering committee where you guys would be the most helpful, because it's really driving how do we want to engage with all of our stakeholders. How are we going to collect that feedback? Are we asking the right questions? Have we done enough engagement along the way? So I think it's at the higher level.
So maybe this should be called the facility master plan steering committee?
Steering committee, we could call it that. That would be better.
For purposes of this, I think. Okay.
But it is short term from the standpoint of that committee. When we finish and the board approves the facility master plan, that committee is done at that point. Then it's on our job to go back and update it on future needs.
Sylvia or Jerry, anything to add?
I think we've been in the sort of the beginning of this process. I think that the plan is to go out and collect input from the community and from the sites. That's what, like early next year?
We're actually starting the process now.
Okay.
We're actually putting an invitation out for community members next week. I believe Leslie's sending out first.
But I guess we haven't gotten to the meat of this, the actual discussion of the facilities, the plans. But I did sort of learn about our holdings and all this. I'm happy to stay on, happy to roll off, just like you guys on the budget. If you want to come over and see what this is like, yeah, I'm very happy to. So,
Lori, I want to hear from Sylvia, and then I'll come back to you. I know you have something to say. Sylvia.
Like Jerry, happy to stay on, happy to more.
Okay.
I have a question. Does this, is sort of the evolution of this, so we're in the facilities master plan, creating the master plan now, then you're going to go to a steering committee for community engagement. When that process is done, does this roll into to ballot action at some point?
It can. So that would require a board resolution if the board chooses to place it on for ballot action. No matter what, we need to do a facility master plan in the district. It's really good for us to have one that we're working off of all the time. The process is interwoven. So it's not like one's happening. So we have a steering meeting, we then go out to the community meeting, we come back to the steering meeting. So there is a ebb and flow to it because we're designing.
So you've had the facilities master plan, then you're going to do kind of the focus and flare up the engagement.
It's a very similar concept.
Is there an in-between step before the board votes on, yes, we want to put a bond measure on the ballot? Is there sort of an in-between phase where we design what we think we're going to package as a potential for take action on?
That would take place in our timeline somewhere between March and May, depending on where we are with the facility master plan. During that, we get a cost analysis. We also have to do a cost analysis in terms of bonding capacity at that point. There's a lot of work that has to take place at that.
And the decision to do the bond is a decision in and of itself based on, so now we have a facility master plan in place. How are we even going to pull that off? And that's when you say, well, we're probably going to need a bond, and then we'll have those conversations relative specific to going out for a bond measure in order to achieve certain aspects of what's in the facility master plan.
So at that point, we would prioritize, right, the master plan based upon how big a bond we're going to go out.
Correct.
So I guess I would say being somebody who was involved with the sort of the ballot action potentially for the parcel, which will continue. I guess I would potentially be interested in sort of following this process through to that point, just so that I have an understanding of the whole flow, but I'm
Great. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
And Jeff, I'm sorry, I had you put that other enrollment one in the wrong place. Do you mind grabbing it and?
It's in there.
Oh, it is? Okay. So, if you don't mind, I'm just going to use that wayward set of slides to do what was on the other one here. So, that maintaining a balanced budget, continue blah, 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 that was in our wording of our priorities. And are we able to make that bigger? I can't remember how we did this one. I'm not sure.
We won't be able to do it. We'll be able to do
That's
it next week.
I think this one was really more just to give you out-year projections. This is from Decision Insight that we've been working with. And the 2019 bluish column is just is showing this year, right? Yeah.
I'll give just one point of clarification on that. So what we presented with you guys last year, how we built the budget was using moderate numbers. And the reason for that, as a district, we took a look at what we had with our previous demographer. We took a look at Decision Insight. Our previous demographer had a lot higher numbers for us this year. And so we all talked, including Dorothy, to say, what is our target number that we think we're going to get this year when we build our budget? And we went with the moderate numbers. Typically, you use the moderate numbers when you're taking a look at facility, but you should use conservative numbers when you build the budget. But the difference between our previous demographer and conservative number was so great, and we were rolling out a new system, so you can't just jump all the way until we see it. Well, it really showed, as we've been working with them, that the conservative numbers going forward are really what we should be using. And so the shift in what this is, this 10-year forecast, is with the conservative numbers. So if you go back to anything we presented last year, the numbers will be slightly higher. It's just tied to moderate versus conservative.
So, and by the way, I should have started by saying our goal is not to talk about the topic, because we didn't really agendize it as a topic per se, but it's to understand what are the things we're looking at in that enrollment committee. Right? Okay, and so we went through and just, I actually shared something like this with you last year, not with this last column, because we didn't have the projection for that next year yet. But if you just take a look at it, this is really what the committee is dealing with. The board at one point, a year and a half ago almost, said, yes, let's try to see if we can get our small schools, and we set a bar at 3 kindergarten classes to be an efficiently run school, staying at 3, going up through the grades, essentially. That set of kindergartners going through. That was the size we were going for. We identified an original 6, I think, or 6 schools, I believe, that we said are in that small school range or on the verge of being a small school given our declining enrollment. And what the committee has been doing is, what we ended up saying is, we hope that by putting our Cooper Doodle programs at those smaller schools, it would build more clientele, et cetera, and we're going to track that and see if that's true. We have been tracking it now for a couple of years, and it has not turned out that way, really. And so just looking at there, we took the Miller, those schools that feeded to Miller, being Blue Hills, Dilworth, Meyerholz, Muir, and looking at their numbers going across. And you can see Blue Hills actually in the aggregate over on the right is that has gone up 29 students over this period of time. They started, though, back at 279 kids, were really, really small, right? But we are seeing evidence of that growing. I also want to remind you the 2 blue rows that are there. It says those are singular jurisdiction schools. But just remembering the board also said, you're not going to take the whole one and only school in Saratoga that is a neighborhood school and close it. And so we're really working hard to get those up. Montclair, same thing. It's a single school in Los Altos, our only one, not likely we would get to a place of having to do something drastic like closing, et cetera. But also, if you look at theirs, they have been able to maintain. What I do want to say is that the furthest, the column that is third from the right, moving to your left, that projection, I think, is really unknown right now, because we haven't given Decision Insight the numbers for this year that are actual numbers. so it will be much more accurate once we give them that CVEDS time, and so we'll bring back more information, so I can't quite count on that number. But without a doubt, when you look at Dilworth, Meyer, Bowles, Muir, there was a trending down. Dilworth's not as much, but still trending down. You see those numbers there. Miller School, we added that, we were tracking that before, but I didn't want you to see Miller dropping from 1250 here and losing 100, is it 194?
194.
Yeah, so, and then, so we did the same, and so what about the feeders to Kennedy? Because Regnar was the main school, we were saying, well, at some point it might go down. Note that they, they dropped, is that 88 jobs? Yeah, so 88, so that's, they're our steepest drop over that period of time at the elementary level, right? Even though they started higher, but at this point, that is something we have to take a look at. And again, looking at month there down at the bottom. So, at this point, really the committee has started focusing on the 3 declining enrollment schools going into that feed to Miller. And then as well, starting to look at Kennedy itself and look at Kennedy dropping to 33.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, right, so those 2 middle schools really dropping, which makes sense because of what's happening in the elementary setting, right? So over time, that's going to happen. So those are, I just want to put in front of you, this just tells you in terms of why we're doing it, what's the purpose, we need to solve this, and it's our understanding that the board would like us, and we promised we would this year, by end of the year latest, and along the way, come back, do a lot of community engagement. It's time to start talking to all these schools and say, what do you think? We want to hear from you, just listen, don't necessarily problem solve yet, but just let's put it out there, like you're saying, we have to inform and then have a conversation, so we're going to start doing that. And the committee, this is a committee that is definitely roll up your sleeves. We have some real work to do this year in this regard. So that's what we are.
Is it possible to get this for all 5 attendance areas, just to be able to compare, just for general knowledge?
Absolutely, yeah. And we're going to do, we have to do several like enrollment update things anyway.
Okay, yeah.
A lot of those and we can do that, but this was specific to the community work right now.
So Sylvia and I have been serving on this committee, and I, just like all the others, happy to continue, happy to relinquish my spot to someone else.
While the subject interests me greatly, and I'd be happy to help, I look at those 2 attendance areas, and I think that there might be some members of our board who could provide a lot of sort of ear to the ground locally in those communities. So,
I'd be happy to take this one, take yours, but I'm assuming Sylvia wanted to stay on since you're the Miller, so I'm happy to.
Up to you, Jerry, if you want it, that's fine.
Sure. Well, unless the teacher really wants to, I guess we should.
Yes. We're not going to finalize until he's had a chance to write it.
Okay. So I think that takes us to wellness at this point. And you want to give that?
So I think it's the last one that we're going to talk about tonight is Wellness Committee. So Wellness Committee is required actually, so we've had it in place, this will be the 3rd year. I think we're recommending that it is a board committee because it would be a continual committee. What we did when we started the Wellness Committee, we did a broad advertising out to the community. Over the course of the 2 years, it's gotten to a smaller, probably too small of a group. And so as you saw earlier this week, we launched another request for individuals to sit on the committee. When we met with them to begin with, when we launched our committee, we had about 8 different topics to explore, and we reached consensus on 2. So that was the primary focus over the first 2 years, and it was employee wellness and health promotion. And so we ended with some deliverables for human resources to take back to their department to begin thinking about what are the things that we can do as shifts and or taking that they were beginning conversations with negotiation teams. And then we also focused on social, emotional wellness and climate. And then what ended up happening last year is a lot of the input that the committee provided became a real focus for Ed Services with MTSS. And what was interesting as we were ranking the topics, that committee ranked student nutrition as their next topic they wanted to explore. And in addition to that, last year in the spring, that was something that the board had asked for. So this year's focus, and potentially next year, it really depends on the work over the course of the year and what we're able to collect as a committee. But the focus we're proposing, or we have proposed, would be student nutrition based on board input last year and also the wellness committee input. So that's where we are.
Anything else you think should be covered from your perspective? I mean, it's kind of new as a board committee. And any thoughts on membership? And by the way, we don't need 2 board members on every committee, right? It can be 1 if that seems right. And I don't know if that does in this case or not. I don't mean to push it in that direction. I'm just saying it occurs to me that some of you are going to be on a lot of different committees and you don't have to do that.
I have an interest in wellness. Again, if anybody else wants to take that spot, it's fine, but that would be an interest of mine.
I think it'll for me in terms of the lunch, but just seeing this
We
well, none of us are fighting really hard for anything. So, I feel like you agree with myself.
And so it sounds like on all the membership ones, because people are saying pretty flexible, there's a couple that were clear that it's good to continue, et cetera. Maybe I'll just work that out by having conversations and try to piece something together, and especially talking to teach everybody's back and walk through it. And I'll make a recommendation at the next board meeting.
Does that work for everybody? Okay. And we're on to action items, I think. Is that true? Okay, so we're on to 13.1, approval of the annual financial report. We need a motion.
I can move to approve the 2018-19 unaudited actuals stats and financial.
And a second?
I'll go ahead and second the motion.
Okay, do we need anything from Jeff on this, or is there any discussion? Questions? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries 4-0. 1 absent. 13.2, approval of appointments to the Measure H Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. Need a motion?
I'll move to approve 13.2, approval of appointment of the Measure H Citizens Bond Oversight Committee.
A second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, discussion?
I was wondering if staff can give us a just brief introduction of the 2 recommendation appointments.
Happy to. So we were really excited when we put this out. We instantly got a lot of community members expressing interest in joining this committee, or the oversight committee. The 2 candidates, one, Will came last year and attempted or tried to be on the board. And part of what Dr. Baker shared with Will and any person that applied to be on the board was please come back, reach out to us, get involved in the district, and he did that. And we also looked at representation throughout the district of our committee, so we had balance among our 5 feeder school patterns that helps us, as well as areas of expertise. And so that leads me into Eric, who works for the high school district. His kids are in school in our district, and he offers a very nice perspective, I think, for our bond oversight committee as we finish off this measure. And if I may, the TBD, I will be bringing back to you next meeting. We did get confirmation today that we actually have a taxpayer association member. We just weren't able to get that tonight, so I'll bring them to the next board.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
So Jeff, with that announcement that went out, if you got people who are interested, is your committee open to additional membership?
Well, our membership right now is filled, so we do not have any open seats left after the next meeting. But are you talking about can people attend the meeting?
Well, so I serve on the high school district committee, and we don't really cap it. We just try to make sure all the necessary ones are filled, but then we have, I think, 3 or 4 extra members so that it helps us meet quorum and things like that.
Are you talking about if we had to have more at-large members?
Yeah, so I mean, if somebody else applied, with the memo that just went out to the wider community for the Taxpayer Association, I don't know if you've gotten any interest in that, but if you do, are we open to additional members?
I need to go back and read the bylaws on that, of how many additional seats beyond what we have. We are completely, we do consider ourselves fully,
we've met
our
all
full
those.
slate has been met,
Right,
but
we've
if you're
met
talking about adding more membership, let me go back and read the bylaws on that. I'm not sure what it says for that.
Yeah, I would want to, and even if the bylaws allow for it, I would want us to talk about that a little more, because it changes the ratio of what makes up that group on a representational basis, you know what I mean? So I would want you to actively want to do that and to allow that additional, because it's not just adding people, it's adding people who have a certain representation, which would change the ratio dynamic. So, which I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying we should talk about that.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. So there's a motion on the table, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0, one absent. And the 13.3 is the adoption of the resolution to issue the bonds. We talked about this at some length at the last meeting. Is there a motion?
I'll move to adopt resolution 19-20-07.
And a second?
One second.
Any questions or comments or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0 passes, one absent. Board and superintendent activity. Let's just start. I'll start.
Okay.
I've only got 3 things. I went to Human Driven Development this last week, and it was on Puberty Talks, and I will also attend PPT next week. So get a good picture of those 2 curricula. And Lori and I are meeting with the union leadership on October 2nd. That will be our fall meeting. And then there'll be a winter meeting, presumably with Lori and Jerry. And then Saturday is the Cupertino Fall Festival. I don't know if we're all going, but I think most of us are. So that's it. Lori.
So I will ditto everything you just said, and then in some of the same places, and will be in some of the same places. And then, let's see, we did have the Los Altos 2x2, which already came up, and I guess that serves as the report out for that. And I have also signed up for the board president's training in January, I want to say. Yeah. And Jared,
I signed up too, and that's how I know when it is.
excellent. So I'll see you there.
Yes, I'll just put in a plug for the Cupertino 2x2 next Thursday when they came, 6 o'clock.
So, just attended a few excellence.
Good. All right. Agenda setting. Anybody have anything they want to see on the agenda, future agenda? Okay. We're done? We are beginning to close, yeah, but we're adjourning to close session, right? Adjourning to close session. At
Thank you, everybody.
8:22.